Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Mulholland, and I am the Director of Learning and HR Compliance for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce. I would like to thank you for joining us along with the Michigan Works this morning for a brief overview of Going Pro Talent and some new developments after the recent appropriation of $55 million for fiscal year 23. The Going Pro Talent Fund was advocated for many within the business community, including the Michigan Chamber, to ensure employers across the Great Lakes state had the opportunity to fill their own talent pipeline by providing necessary trainings, certificates, and upskilling opportunities to employees, reimbursed by the state through the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, also known as LEO. Through the Going Pro Talent Fund, LEO can award reimbursements to employers to assist in training, developing, and retaining current and newly hired employees through the Michigan Works Association, which is why we are excited to partner with the association to provide you with the in-the-know information for your business and its subsequent talent pipeline to thrive. We hope you leave today with some key takeaways and action items. If you need assistance at any time today, please type your comments into the chat box. You may also type your questions for the speakers into the Q&A box. A copy of the presentation slides will be shared in the chat box. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Terry Sanders.
Talking about the Talent Fund today, we're going to break it down in these areas. I'll start with an overview. Then we'll talk about which businesses are potentially eligible to apply and which workers could receive training through the Talent Fund, as well as what kind of training you could be reimbursed for. We'll talk about the scoring criteria. What is the application process? And of course, if your application is approved, what would it take to get your company reimbursed? And what are those important next steps? The overview. The Talent Fund is an opportunity for your business to potentially be reimbursed for some of the costs of training your full-time employees. $55 million has been appropriated this year, which would be referred to as fiscal year 23. This year, there is a maximum of $500,000 per award, which should not be a problem for most businesses, as the average over the last 9 years, the average award was a little over $32,000. And that was used to train an average of about $1,000 per person. The Talent Fund application is a very competitive process. $55 million sounds like a lot, and it is. We're very thankful to the state for making that available to you. But there's many more dollars worth of training that your business and all the businesses across the state will need. So every year, excuse me, every year there has been more applications than the amount of funding available. So there is no guarantee of funding for every application that is submitted, even for those that do meet all of the eligibility criteria. Part of that competitiveness is a very strict deadline by which applications will need to be submitted. And we'll talk about that, of course, on a later slide. If you've been familiar with the Talent Fund in the past, or even under a prior name, the Skilled Trades Training Fund, the rules do change every single year, so that one of the purposes of today's presentation is to let you know what we know so far about the rules for fiscal year 23. And if your application is approved, there is a commitment beyond just submitting the application. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a later slide as well. The key priorities for fiscal year 23 are first and foremost, training that leads to an industry-led credential. This year's application will be much simpler, so we're very excited about that. Part of that revised application is that it will show you what your score turns out to be once you hit the submit button. Yes, I did say you will be able to see your score. However, we will not receive information from the state of Michigan as to exactly what cutoff they'll be using to determine which applications they approve. And this year, there will be multiple application cycles. So which businesses are eligible? For the most part, all private sector businesses, whether for-profit or not-for-profit in Michigan, who are in compliance with their federal and state taxes, are potentially eligible to apply for the Talent Fund. So what would be expected of your business? The Talent Fund has always been used to support long-term, full-time, permanent employees. So the expectation, of course, would be that you hire and retain all of the workers that you want to use the Talent Fund to reimburse you for training. The wages that you pay your workers are at or above the current labor market in your region for their appropriate job titles and occupations. The training would take place after the award date, and you would submit applicable documentation after each training ends in order to request the reimbursements. The Talent Fund cannot be used to purchase tools or equipment or laptops, something like that for your company, nor books or supplies if those are not inherently rolled into the tuition for that classroom training. Licensing fees or even testing fees, perhaps to get a particular worker certified in their occupation, the Talent Fund cannot reimburse your company for those either. The Talent Fund should not be used to develop curriculum or travel costs to get someone to a classroom training, nor online training subscriptions, consulting, or any training prior to the award date. So I do want to pause already just to see if there are any questions in the chat regarding the Talent Fund as a whole, the overview we started with, or what kind of businesses might potentially consider applying. Is there anything in the chat yet, Anna? I'll pause just a moment. I'm being told there's nothing in the chat quite yet, which is fine. Just didn't want to go too far if you do have questions. All right, if as additional questions come up, please put those in the chat. We'll pause 2 additional times as we move through. So if your business is eligible, which of your workers could you potentially be reimbursed to train through the Talent Fund? All workers must be on your payroll in a full-time permanent capacity by the first day of the training that you are considering the Talent Fund to reimburse. Now, the Talent Fund's definition of full-time is 32 hours per week. So that if that happens to vary from your business's definition, know that we're talking about those full-time workers 32 hours per week or more. They certainly could be people already on your payroll or yet to be hired within 31 days prior to the award date, and or future workers that you would hire 30 days prior on and certainly after the award date. Every single one of these workers that you're asking to be reimbursed through the Talent Fund must be legally eligible to work in the United States and at least age 18 by the first day of their training. If you have remote workers who need training, you could potentially include them in your Talent Fund application if wherever it is that they live, all of the applicable taxes are returned to the state of Michigan. If your business typically brings workers in on a staffing agency's payroll and you're trying to forecast at which time they might potentially be on your payroll, meeting all of the above criteria we've already discussed on this slide, you want to also think about when they move to your payroll and off of the staffing agency payroll, are they in a new job title, a new role, or are we giving them new training towards new skills? If yes, then you could potentially include those people on your talent fund application. But if they're doing the exact same role with no additional skills or training the day they move to your payroll as compared to the day they were on the staffing agency payroll, you would not include them on your talent fund application. The maximum reimbursement this year is $2,000 per person. That is a welcomed increase from years past, so I'll say that again. The maximum reimbursement is $2,000 per person. Those could be the existing employees on your payroll now or hired up to 31 days before their classroom training begins. And that classroom training this year must lead to a certificate, a certification, an academic credit, or a license. The maximum $2,000 reimbursement also applies to new hires that you plan to bring onto your full-time payroll 30 days before the award date, on or after that award date. They must be in classroom training that also leads to a certificate, certification, academic credit, or license. The only scenario in which on-the-job training can be included for the new hires would be in addition to at least one eligible classroom training. The maximum reimbursement this year for U.S. Department of Labor registered apprentices also increased, and that is $3,500 per registered apprentice. Another change this year is that all active apprentices are potentially eligible, regardless of which year of their apprenticeship they are currently in. I'm going to repeat that because that is another change. All active apprentices are potentially eligible, regardless of which year of their apprenticeship they are currently in. Their classroom training and or on-the-job training can be included on the plan. However, they must officially be registered in the Department of Labor's Rapids website before the training that you have on your talent fund plan begins. So as you're forecasting which new hires perhaps you might want to put into training in an apprenticeship category, or if you're making progress towards registering an apprenticeship with the Department of Labor that hasn't quite been finalized yet, you may want to hold off in counting them as a registered apprentice in this particular application cycle, or be very, very conservative as to when you think that that registration will occur. They must be a registered apprentice with the Department of Labor before the training on the Talent Fund begins. Now, we talked on those last two slides about some maximum reimbursements of $2,000 and $3,500. There are a couple scenarios where your company could receive a bonus in addition to the figures mentioned prior. The first opportunity for an incentive bonus is if you have new hires on your plan and you're successful in hiring a military veteran, an active reservist, someone who is age 55 or above, a returning citizen, someone with a disability, or was receiving public assistance right before the time that you hired them. So if we received the proper documentation, you could be reimbursed the applicable figure on the prior slide plus $500. Another scenario is if someone on your talent fund application training plan has not completed their high school level of education. So that certainly could be one of your existing workers, or maybe someone you have not yet hired who has not completed their high school level of education. And if your company is willing to give them work time and pay them their same hourly wage while they work on completing that education, your company could receive an additional $1,000 incentive. Now, even if the individual that you, in either of these categories, meets multiple categories, the maximum incentive to your company would only be one of those. So even if they meet multiple categories, we can only process one incentive reimbursement. That documentation that proves which one or multiple categories they fall into is submitted right along at the same time as whatever other training they were taking part in on your Talent Fund application training plan. Eligible classroom training providers. Every year, the Talent Fund has supported training that results in academic credit. So of course, our Michigan community colleges and public and private colleges and universities are welcome as the selected training provider that you choose. There are various other training providers as you would choose the right classroom training providers for your workers. They might be private training providers or labor unions, joint apprenticeship training centers. As long as it's an independent third-party vendor, they could also be a proprietary school that's licensed in Michigan. Maybe your company has purchased or is going to purchase some new software or equipment, and you need to train your workers on how to use it. That vendor who sold you that equipment or training provider might be the best training provider. All instruction must be live instructor-led and lead to a credential, a certificate, academic credit, certification, or license. Ineligible classroom training topics, and this list does change every year. We have not officially received the fiscal 23 list of eligible and ineligible training. However, the state has led us to believe that it will look very similar to last year. Soft skills have never been supported by the Talent Fund, and that definition is things like time management and customer service, conflict resolution, business writing, and communication. So you would want to not include those classroom topics on the Talent Fund, nor adult education or literacy, and no basic introductory overview kinds of trainings for any topic. Languages are not allowed through the Talent Fund unless it is an English as a second or multiple language rather, or American Sign Language, for which the curriculum and the content has been customized specifically to the work context at your place of business. Microsoft Office products are not eligible, nor are laws, regulations, or taxes. And human resource topics are not eligible unless the HR professional is enrolled, actively enrolled in a U.S. Department of Labor registered apprenticeship, and the class they need this particular term is for college academic credit. Overall, the kinds of training that is not considered eligible and for which the Talent Fund cannot reimburse: any seminars, conferences, workshops, continuing ed credits, online sources where your workers would be choosing a course over time, sort of that online subscription model. Any online training that is self-paced. You heard me say on a prior slide, all instruction should be live in real time with the instructor. In-house training for your existing workers is not eligible, nor is wage reimbursement for existing workers. All training on the Talent Fund application should be short-term, and the Talent Fund defines that as something that would complete in less than 6 months. And all training must complete in less than 12 months from the award date. I do want to clarify a couple specific classroom training topics that the Talent Fund has a few extra comments about. Many of you need leadership training, and if that's the case, you'll simply need to attach the particular syllabus or curriculum summary in your application so that the state can see the course objectives and competencies that your workers will obtain through that particular course. If you wanted to include safety training in your Talent Fund application, it needs to be above and beyond whatever is the normal cost of doing business in your particular industry. process improvement or risk and quality management courses should ideally be Black or Green Belt. They must have a hands-on component and be competency-based. So let's pause again here to see what questions you have for me so far. We've talked about what businesses are eligible, which of your workers, and what kind of training is eligible. I suspect there's a few questions in the chat now, Anna.
We did receive one.
Excellent.
The question was, our SHRM SHRM CP/SCP certifications allowed, which is a big deal in the HR world in terms of those certifications.
It is a very big deal. I agree, Amy. So in case all those letters are not familiar, let me try to share what I just heard. So the Department of Labor recently registered an apprenticeship with the SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. So it is an official apprenticeship registered with SHRM through the Department of Labor. It's very exciting. So check that out if you need more details. But the question is, would that be eligible on the Talent Fund application? As we sit here today, I believe the correct answer would be no, because the academic portion, the classroom training portion of that particular training is not currently attached to academic credit. Now, the known exception to that could be the individual employers who are registering their HR professionals with that particular apprenticeship can choose to add additional specialties for the HR professionals at their particular business. And if one of those specialties has a classroom training that would result in academic credit at a community college, university, etc., then that might be the exception. But as stated, the initial SHRM apprenticeship itself would probably not qualify this year. Excellent question. Any other ones?
Terry, yes, there was one more. Will funds be used for training existing employees?
Existing employees. Absolutely, the Talent Fund can be used to reimburse for the training that you're doing for your existing workers. Again, the definition for whether they're showing up on the training plan as an existing worker is they were on your payroll full-time, 32 hours a week, age 18, legally eligible to work in the US, all those kinds of things. Full-time existing would be 31 days or more. They've been on your payroll 31 days or more prior to the award date. So assuming all of that is the case and you choose an eligible classroom training that you need to send them to, absolutely include them on your training plan.
And Terry, another question did come in, actually two more. Although green and black belt is preferred, what other types of QM have been approved in the past?
Well, the easiest answer there is I don't know. The state of Michigan LEO staff would know, would have access to every application that they have received. I would only have access to those that came through my individual Michigan Works, but I could attempt to see if that information is available to us. So I'm not sure if whoever asked that question has a way of identifying themselves to the chamber, that maybe Amy would be able to get me your name if I can follow up on that, but I don't quite know the answer.
Actually, yes, we do have the name and we will follow up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then also, is the 2,000 limit per person for the year or 2,000 per training for that individual?
Okay. Well, possibly both. The maximum per person reimbursement is per person. So if, as you're looking at which of your workers need what kinds of training and what training providers you're going to choose that would give the right training you want them to have, what of course is the cost of that training. So if you need to send me to something that is super, super expensive, i.e. way more than 2,000, the answer might be just one training. But if the types of training you need to send me as one person to are a few different trainings that each cost a couple $100s, it's possible that the combination of all of those eligible trainings still didn't reach the 2,000. So might be a long answer to the simplest way is it's a maximum of 2,000 per person, regardless of how many eligible trainings that takes to reach the amount you're asking the state to be reimbursed for. It's probably a very long and wordy answer, but I hope it was clear. Any other questions? These are great. Keep them coming. Okay, I'm seeing there are no additional questions at the moment. We'll pause one other time a little bit later, but for now, let's move forward then. We talked about which businesses and which kind of training and which workers could be potentially eligible. So hopefully now you're planning to apply, you've got something at your company that might be eligible, and we want to move forward with what that looks like. The scoring criteria. As we sit here today, the state has not yet released the fiscal year 23 scoring criteria. They have told us two things. One, it will contain objective categories, which I've looked back at last year's objective criteria were things like, was there an eligible classroom training on the plan that resulted in academic credit? Was there at least one U.S. Department of Labor registered apprentice on the plan? How many full-time employees at the place of business? Different kinds of things like that. So I'm assuming it will be somewhat similar this year. They have also indicated that in some way, the scoring criteria will favor the businesses that they are, the industries that they are considering priority. So I will read these. They are listed in alphabetical order, but I do want to make sure if anyone is listening on the phone and not able to see the slide, they'll have an idea what those priority industries are. They're listed as agribusiness, construction, education, energy, healthcare, hospitality or outdoor recreation, information technology, manufacturing, and mobility. So what is the process to apply? Well, first and foremost, the process does require that you meet with Michigan Works, where their conversation shows around what kind of training you anticipate needing for your workers and the appropriateness for the type of training that you need. Does it fit well with this year's expectations of the Talent Fund? And potentially, might there be some additional funding as well that your business could connect with? Then you would start to select the best training for your workers, establish a My Login or an active account on the mytalent.org website, so that when it's time to request authorization in the Talent Fund website, that process will be quicker. So I mentioned on an earlier slide, there will be multiple application cycles or periods this year. So they are broken down by what's being called cycle 1 and cycle 2. So the schedule for cycle 1 applicants will look like this. In October, we expect that you'll be able to request authorization in the Talent Fund website. And I've listed their web address here. These dates are subject to change, but they were the dates that were disclosed to us, and they also said they might yet be subject to change. So with that in mind, I'll share what they said. November 14th, they expect to release the application instructions, and on November 15th, open the application itself. Again, that'd be an online application in the Talent Fund website. Your deadline would be December 15th by 4:59 Eastern Standard Time to submit that application. And these cycle 1 applications would be for training that you want to take place between February 1st of 2023 through January 31st of 2024. I'm going to repeat those dates. February 1st of 2023 through January 31st of 2024. So note that the January 2023 timeframe is not to be included in any way, shape, or form, regardless of apprenticeship courses that might start in January or any college academic courses that typically start in January either. The cycle 2 applicants, if that makes better sense for your company, in February, we expect that you'll be able to request authorization in the Talent Fund website, the application instructions to be released in March, the application to open and close in April, for training that would take place July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. So I'm going to repeat the training dates. Cycle 2, if your business wants to apply in Cycle 2, the training would take place July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Continuing then with the application process. So when you've requested authorization, if that authorization was granted, you can begin the application in the website. And the type of information you'd be entering would be the start and end dates for the entire plan. When is the first possible date you'd like training to begin? And when is the last possible date by which you're confident everything on that plan would be completed? For each classroom training, and remember, everyone on the training plan this year must participate in at least one eligible classroom training. And so for each of those classroom trainings, you're entering which training provider you've selected, where their place of business address is, whether it's a public or private trainer, and what sort of credential or academic credit your workers will earn from taking that class, the course titles, the correct cost per person, the quantity of people that you need to attend each class, the quantity of workers you intend to hire and take each class, and the average hourly wage of your trainees. If applicable, some on-site training for some of your new hires, in addition to their eligible classroom training. What are those job titles you intend to hire? What is the average hourly wage you intend to hire them at? And how many hours do you plan to train them? If you do have Department of Labor registered apprentices in any year, and they will be registered with the Department of Labor before that training begins, then you want to correctly enter them in the Talent Fund website. So it will be important that you select USDOL registered apprenticeship -classroom, or if applicable, /OJT for each applicable apprentice. No other workers on your plan should show up with that USDOL registered apprenticeship preface before the type of training that they are in. If there's a scenario where you have some apprentices and non-apprentices who need the exact same course, or perhaps at the time of the application, you're not confident that you'll get some of them registered as apprentice, so they need to be on your plan as a non-apprentice, make sure that you're entering the course twice, once with the USDOL registered apprenticeship preface and once without. In the application, you'll also be predicting how your company will contribute to the training financially. And those could include some in-kind figures as well. But essentially, the state wants to see that in addition to their funds, your company will be contributing in some way to make sure the training happens. Wages while your workers are in classroom training add up fairly quickly. It's also a figure that you have ready access to and can multiply times the number of hours they'll be sitting in classroom training. If you choose a classroom training that's out of town and someone needs travel expenses to get there, or a hotel or something like that, you could count those kinds of things. Books and supplies and exams that are not rolled into the cost of tuition could be included as your company's contribution. If you're blessed with conference room space or a training room and you want to have the training happen there, you could potentially include an in-kind figure for the use of that space. If you do need to develop curriculum or purchase online subscriptions for other trainings that you also need these workers to participate in at your company expense, or the purchasing of tools or equipment or laptops that are truly related to the training that's on the plan, just make sure to only include 1 year's depreciation value of those items. Or if there are licensing and consulting fees that you need in order to support these trainings, again, at your company expense, you could include those as part of your contribution. All of the calculations of whatever ways you're anticipating your company's contribution, you would include that on the application. So just to clarify, because many of the bullet points on this slide were on an earlier slide, The earlier slide was that these things are not items that Talent Fund itself can be used to reimburse your company for. They can be included as the ways that your company is contributing to the training because you have paid for them and are not getting reimbursed for them. Be thoughtful during the application process of entering conservative as well as realistic training plans. What is the realistic quantity of workers that you will train? In which types of training? What are the actual start and end dates in which you are confident all of the training can occur between? You've taken into consideration busy seasons for your business or health considerations and some, the recruiting challenge that many companies are having now, all of those kinds of factors. Because whatever is on your application, if yours is successfully approved by the state, they will expect that all of that training on the plan occurs as originally entered. And it's important to understand you cannot transfer money, so to speak, between the folks you've listed on your application as a USDOL registered apprentice and non-apprentices. So you want to be very careful to estimate realistically how many USDOL registered apprentices will actually be registered before their training on the Talent Fund plan begins. Then, as we continue our discussion of what that application process looks like, then you'll want to hit the submit button, right? And there will be a very important deadline to pay attention to. So you'll want to remember that that deadline is going to come from some state of Michigan clock, and not necessarily your particular computer or your watch. So pay attention to that deadline. We do know that there are no extensions and no appeals under any circumstance. So what happens after you click the submit button? It is then viewable by Michigan Works, and if needed, we can unlock it for you to make a couple additional edits. And then Michigan Works hits a submit button and sends it off to the state of Michigan for their review and ultimate approval or not. In that process, they do talk to the Department of Treasury and make sure that your company is in compliance with state and federal taxes. Even if there are fines or penalties still owed, there would not be an award made at that time. Then the state will announce their awards. It is important to understand, we talked about those two cycles. So if you were a cycle 1 applicant that did not get approved, you could potentially apply again a new application for cycle 2 if the training is still needed at that point and those dates, because remember there were 2 totally different 12-month training periods, but if the cycle 2 dates were still applicable to part of the training that you needed, you could potentially apply for cycle 2. If awarded, that's the whole point, right? So we're hoping that your application is approved. Then after each of those trainings on your plan complete, you would give Michigan Works the various documents that are needed for the reimbursements or any of those incentives if applicable. In the Talent Fund website, the actual company contribution is updated, the average hourly wage of your workers when their training ended, excuse me, the average hourly wage, again, 6 months after the training ended, and an impact story, an update as to what's been going on, what have you seen, what's happening in the company since the training took place, how did your company benefit from that training. Now, there is actually a third way to apply for the Talent Fund. It's called an industry-led collaborative. So if your business is collaborating already and has a history of doing so with some other businesses, a minimum of one other one, and is committed to continuing that collaboration after the training, and you each need the same type of classroom training, it's possible that the industry-led collaborative is for you. So you'll want to apply together. There is a separate set of funds within that $55 million that the Talent Fund is set aside. There's a separate industry-led collaborative application and separate scoring criteria. And we expect that the industry-led collaborative application will open in early 2023 between the cycle 1 and the cycle 2. However, you can have one of the cycles. You could have an independent application between cycle 1 or cycle 2 and an industry-led collaborative. So if you meet the definition here of what's expected of an industry-led collaborative, it's possible you could also apply for one of the independent application cycles as well. So let's pause again before a final wrap up and see what questions might be in the chat currently. No questions they're telling me, so I'm going to hold just a moment and see if somebody is a quick typer of a last minute question there. Looks like we might have gotten one. Just a moment.
Yes, we did get another one. What is the training window for ILCs?
Excellent question again. Thank you very much. As we sit here this moment, I don't know. That was not made clear to us. I think that's part of when they release the separate application and separate scoring criteria. It's probably going to be a few months before they'll share that level of details. I'm not 100% clear, so I don't want to misstate whether that would need to finish in calendar year 2023 or at which portion of 2024 that would continue. Because both cycle 1 and cycle 2 independent applications have at least some time period in calendar year 2024. My heart tells me there's going to be a portion of calendar 2024 that would be included in the ILCs. I just don't know that for certain. So my best advice to whoever asked that question or whoever else it applies to, talk to your local Michigan Works, make sure they know you're interested in the ILC option so that as those details are released, you are made aware and can decide if the particular time frame that's allowed fits the time frame that your workers need to be trained. I hope that answers your question. Is that the only one for the moment? Okay then. So we'll have, just wanted to summarize a few things for you. So as we sit here today, hopefully you've heard that there's some piece of training within your company that you need your workers trained on and you will be applying. So what do I want you, or what do I recommend you do today or very, very soon? Meet with Michigan Works. We talked on an earlier slide. That's a vital step in the process. So if you don't know how to reach someone at Michigan Works, in the Talent Fund website that is listed here on this slide, if you'll scroll down, you'll find a map that looks like this picture. And in that website, when you click on your county or your region, it will show you how to contact someone from the Michigan Works close to you. As you're gathering details to prepare for your application, we suggest that you think about these kinds of things. What training do your workers even need? Which of your full-time workers need classroom training? Which of your Department of Labor registered apprentices are going to need training or will be registered in 2023? Which of your workers are you planning to hire full-time and will also need classroom training? When can training occur? When are your busy seasons and you want to make sure that the training is on your plan occur? So when would that make the most sense? And this year, that when question is more important than ever because you'll have to be thoughtful between should we apply cycle 1 or cycle 2? Who do we want to conduct the various trainings for our workers? Where would that training take place? How is our company going to contribute to make this training happen? And is our business current on taxes? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry, and the Michigan Works. This is such an exciting opportunity for our state. For those of you who attended live, you should have a copy of the presentation within your chat box. And also, please find our upcoming programs at webinars.mychamber.com. Today's program is copyright 2022 by Michigan Chamber of Commerce with all rights reserved. We want to thank you for joining us and have a wonderful day, and really good luck to those of you who apply. Once again, this is such a wonderful opportunity for our state. And thanks again.
Michigan Works.